Well, good morning and good afternoon if you happen to be in Brooklyn, New York, or somewhere on the eastern coast of the United States in the Atlantic Ocean. Good evening if you're somewhere in Germany or anywhere in Europe or most of Africa. Greetings to people all over the world. Welcome to Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Idagio, the place where classical music happens. Idagio is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to fans all around the world. My guest today is a lovely artist who I feel a great kinship to because we're kind of from the same place at the same time. And I think we even grew up in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. And but she has lived much of her life in Europe, in Germany specifically. She's Bonita Hyman, a mezzo-soprano, opera and concert singer, voice teacher, and choral director. Bonita, welcome.
Thank you.
So I know I have many questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to start with one that I think I've been saving for years for you. Choral director
hmm
um, is a very important job. It's a different job. Obviously, an American who leads choruses in the United States has a certain kind of work and responsibility and so on. But you are a choral director in Germany. I know many people sing for you, with you, study with you. Talk about what it's like to run a chorus or more than one chorus in Germany and how it might be different from the US.
Well, the, the biggest difference, of course, is language.
Mm-hmm.
I work with my people in German,
Yep.
and I took a course of study here in Germany at the Chorleiterschule in Marburg, specifically to learn the language of choral conducting here. I knew all the terminology in English, but translating that and also the philosophical differences, cultural differences in terms of how people relate. You know, it's not enough to be a fine singer or a fine musician. There are organizational skills required to be a choral director, and to translate those skills into a foreign language and culture was what the challenge was here. And so far so good. I've been at it for 12 years.
Well, when I studied German, my first German classes were here in New York, not at a university. I did other
Mm.
languages in the university, but I went to it was called Sigrid's German Studio. And she was a lovely person. She was actually from Norway, but spoke
Oh.
excellent German. And it was geared, I didn't know this when I signed up, more toward people who intended to conduct business in Germany and to go there and know how to hold a meeting, how to order, what the way that you speak to people in meetings and the business culture of Germany. And I was there as an opera guy. So I was interested to learn this. But what Sigrid alerted me to through her work was the degree to which the culture of interaction is different there in Germany than it might be here in the US or in
Very
every
much
other
so.
country. And I
Mhm.
remember my first textbooks were all about as you said, philosophical, I would say behavioral approaches to people and how you fit in, what is offensive, what is appreciated. I remember that she taught me that if I'm dining in a restaurant, there's an empty seat, someone can come take the seat next to me, whereas perhaps in the US they would not automatically do that. Um,
Mm.
what have you found in terms of working with Germans and people living in Germany in a choral environment that you've had to teach them about cohesion, I think is the word I want to use.
Well, hmm. the tendency is to be quite a bit more introverted than Americans.
Mhm.
reserved. And some of my challenge in terms of working with them has been to kind of get past that shyness and introversion and to let go a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Also, um, there's also an approach to making music that specifically is in the background that I come from, because I come from, well, I'm an African American, I come from a church background and all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So there are certain cultural musical idioms that are to me as second nature that I have to find a way to, what we say in German, übermitteln,
Yeah.
to bring across. And the best way I found of getting across to people has been to use humor.
Mm-hmm.
I tell a lot of silly jokes, and to let them know that they have permission to make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a big fear in this culture, the fear
Yeah.
of making a mistake. It's a huge thing, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it really blocks people from it immobilizes people even
Yeah.
because they're afraid of doing something wrong. And I tell people, if you're going to make a mistake, make it loud,
Mm-hmm.
because then I can hear it, and then I'm in a position to help you. You know.
So let's take a piece, and you can pick whatever piece you want that you might be working with a chorus on. And
Mm-hmm.
let's say it's a German language work, just for starters. And
Mm-hmm.
let's say that it might be by a composer that they all know of, but they may not have the grounding in that composer, even someone as famous as Bach or Beethoven,
Mm-hmm.
where there may be stylistic issues, where there may be the meaning behind the words.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean that very advisedly. I know you know what I mean when I say the meaning behind the words. Um, this is not necessarily something that a member of a chorus would bring with him or her when they arrive at the chorus. How do you start working a particular piece of music with a chorus?
Well, there are a couple of factors to take into account. Um, so there's a generational thing, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, and younger people have much less of an awareness of the connection with music and history, specifically in terms of Germany. And older people have very vivid memories, especially, people who were children during the war,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and particularly in the um, folk music repertoire, you know, there has been an association with certain negative things
Mm-hmm.
in history, um, in connection with some of these songs, and it's unfortunate because it's not the song's fault,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
you know. So I have to use a bit of discretion
Mm-hmm.
and skew more towards more modern pieces,
Uh-huh.
yeah, or strictly classical stuff, like Mozart or something like this that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have that connection. And if I do, say, a contemporary setting of a folk melody, to pick carefully which ones I use
Mm-hmm.
and how I approach it. Does that make sense?
It to me it certainly does.
Mm-hmm.
Um, could you name one piece hypothetically and expound on how you would work with that particular piece?
Well, one of the pieces that I do with Kaleidoscope. That's my own choir that I started in the Volkshochschule in Gießen.
Hmm.
Is in einem kühlen Grunde.
Yeah.
And that was a song that was actually requested by one of the members, you know. And so I kind of followed his lead on that.
Hmm.
I said, if it's okay with this gentleman, and he's 50, so he's
Yeah.
kind of in between generations with that, um, then it's safe.
And what is, for people who don't know, what is einen coolen Grunde?
In a cool glade.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about a green space, like a
Hmm.
meadow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, would in general, if you can generalize, do these choruses in effect sing for themselves, for their own pleasure and emotion, or is it about performing in, let's say, churches or small opera companies or other settings? Why do they form as a chorus?
Well, there are different kinds of choruses. For what we call the Dorfchor, the the choir that's in a small town where it's been in existence for over a century. There's a historical legacy
Hmm.
that goes along with that, and excuse me, it's a social outlet. It's where neighbors can meet up and make music together and have fun in this way. Um, it's yeah, it's more a social outlet than anything else in that
Hmm.
in that regard. And um, with the choir that I have in Otzenheim, they are affiliated with the church, and so for certain church holidays of the year, um, they are expected or encouraged to participate.
Hmm.
And so I prepare them for these performances. For um, Otzenheim, there not for Eringshausen. There is also a connection with the church there, but that is more kind of a Gesangsverein. That's specifically for themselves. It's
Hmm.
like a social organization,
Yeah.
and as an extension of being a social organization, they might participate in church activities. With Kaleidoscope, that is structured as a course in the Volkshochschule. The Volkshochschule is like a community college
Hmm.
or a continuing adult education kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And it has more in connection in the German section culture with what we might call a Projektchor,
Hmm.
a choir that's brought together for a specific project, but the project is ongoing.
Hmm.
So we work on a semester basis, and each semester the same people sign up. So they are like a standing choir because of the consistency of the membership. But new people come in. Sometimes people take a break if they have certain personal issues they have to deal with, medical stuff or family stuff or whatever. Um, and they come back. So there's a flexibility with that.
I don't know if you've been to Cincinnati in the United States, but Cincinnati has a
Hmm.
very large old German population and a very large old African American population. Those
Yes,
are the two biggest groups.
I
And
almost went to school
Cincinnati,
in Cincinnati.
oh, really? Okay. For people who don't know America, Cincinnati is on the north part of the Ohio River. The
Mhm.
south part, for people who read their Toni Morrison and other books, basically when people escaped enslavement, often they came across the river into Cincinnati. And the northern part of the city has a wonderful large black community and a beautiful market founded in 1852. It's also the city that has the oldest choral festival in the United States.
Oh.
And it was founded, in effect, by the Germans. I think it dates back to about 1875. And I, about a year ago, had on the current director, who I'm remembering his last name was Porco. His first name, I think, was Robert, but I don't want to misstate it. And he
Mm.
was talking about working with the choruses in Cincinnati, who are comprised primarily of the German American population and the African American population,
Hmm.
and the particular wonderful combination of that. But I
It is a
remember he used a
combination.
term that I loved, because we were talking about singing in different languages. And south of Cincinnati is the state of Kentucky across the Ohio River. And when we were talking about language, he said they sing in Kentucky Latin. Which means
Well,
it's not quite decipherable. It's approximative rather than precise. But the
we get
Cincinnati
we get Dinglish over here, so
the Cincinnati May Festival is called. For many years, James Conlon was the head of it. It's a wonderful choral festival that I've been to. Um, but to me, that is the example here in North America of this German choral tradition that you're a part of. And I've always been fascinated and admiring of the German choral tradition because it is not only about making music, but the social component,
yes,
which other countries have too, but in Germany it's very particular.
yeah, it's
And I'm
really kind of a
intrigued in,
it's a
yeah,
neighborhood kind of thing. It's like,
right.
you're with your neighbors.
And I'm intrigued and pleased that they have an African American choral director who they embrace, and do they ask to perform music from the Black tradition of the United States,
Oh yeah,
for
all the
example?
time.
Yeah.
Well, they often confuse spirituals and gospel music.
Yep.
And they want to do gospels, and what
Mm-hmm.
they mean
Ah,
are spirituals.
yeah.
And
For our listeners who may not know, I know this like the back of my hand, but please define the differences and the similarities between spiritual, used to be called Negro spirituals, and gospel.
well, spirituals come specifically out of the slavery,
Hmm.
and had evolved from field hollers and lining in the
Hmm.
church and this kind of thing, chants, event that evolved into, like most folk music, into traditional forms.
Hmm.
Gospel is modern, 20th century, and incorporates elements of spirituals and elements of blues,
Yeah.
you know. And so you'll have in gospel music electric instruments, for instance, like,
Hmm.
and things like this, that you wouldn't have with spirituals, that kind of thing. Um, the it's kind of like two branches of the same tree,
Hmm.
you know.
Um, I last year, about a year ago now, had as my guest the wonderful Twinkie Clark on this program,
Ah, okay.
who I'm a big lover of gospel and spirituals,
Hmm.
and to have Twinkie on was a real honor because she's a composer, she's a musician, she she channels things within her hands and feet onto the organ she plays that
Oh.
are just astounding, and her awareness of musical forms goes well beyond the traditional straight form of gospel to whole other worlds of music, and she was quite astonishing. Um, but gospel, we kind of date back to about 1924 to
Yeah.
Thomas A. Dorsey,
Yes.
who wrote music, and then there were other singers who came along. But gospel, somewhere pretty early on, I won't say it became the domain of women, but I think they just did it better as a general term. They formed. There were male groups, but there were many of the female groups were they would produce star after star after star in these groups.
Well, I think some of that has to do with the distribution in the churches themselves.
Uh-huh.
There, there tend to be more women in church than men,
Yeah.
and the reasons for that are complicated.
Hmm.
But often the people who are in charge of the church, the minister, the deacons, and all that kind of thing, are all men.
Yeah.
And to this day, that's still a thing,
Yeah.
you know. And a substantial part of the people who do the grunt work in the church are
The
women.
women. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. The ones
Yeah.
who cook the dinners and do the ushering and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so it's it might be a matter of sheer numbers because there are simply more women in church.
But it's also, I don't know, I find, and you're an opera singer, I
Hmm.
find that among women who sing gospel really well, they connect to the same emotion or emotionality that an opera singer does.
Yes.
And, when I'm asked about my love of music and so on, I always quote the gospel in my house, which is to say, Duke Ellington said, there are only two types of music, good music and the other type. And you know good music when you hear it. But
Mm,
within that, I always say that opera is the thing that moves me most, but gospel is second.
mm,
And when you have a wonderful gospel singer, usually a woman, she can summon emotions and connect to emotions in the music and in the lyric that may be completely different in narrative. If an opera singer is singing about something dramatic, she or someone usually dies in the end. But if a
mm.
gospel singer sings about something dramatic, it's often about overcoming. It's about
Yes.
adversity that's then surmounted. And you can hear a change in the music when suddenly it's like the window opens and the light comes in and she finds her way through. How I got over, things like
Mm.
that. Whereas an opera singer would be, oh, woe is me, this is it. But somehow the great emotional power when it's sung with sincerity and faithfulness to the words of music, I only find in gospel and opera to that
Oh,
degree.
there's a catharsis there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a release.
I know. All right. Do you have favorite gospel singers?
Oh my goodness. Mm. Well, there's Shirley Caesar.
Okay, here we go. We are on the
Yeah.
same page, my dear. Pastor Shirley Caesar from North Carolina,
Yeah.
who
Well,
tells
North
these,
Carolina, where all my people are from.
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Shirley Caesar tells these narratives, these stories that she's different because, yes, she sings, but she also enacts the roles. So there's one narrative about the good son and the bad son,
Mm-hmm.
and the mother who has been abandoned, and the bad son seems to be the bad one and the good one the good one, but somehow the wife of the good son never has time for mama, whereas the quote bad son recognizes the sacrifices that his mother has made, and he turns out to be good again. And when Shirley Caesar tells and sings these stories, playing all the roles, it's kind of like Earl Koenig that you're singing three or four different characters all at once. It's an
Mm.
astonishing event when she does that. So,
Oh
okay,
my.
that's one.
Well, there's the Clark sisters.
Also, yep.
Yeah.
How do you feel
And
about Albertina Walker?
oh, I grew up with her. So
I mean, to me, Albertina was really, really, really special because her
that
voice,
was a favorite of my mother's. My
oh,
mother really
really?
loved it. Yeah.
Okay. her singing was so secure, for one thing,
Mhm.
that you could kind of depend on her. Not that other singers you couldn't, but there was a certain kind of mezzo-soprano solidity and safety there that you knew that she could take whatever she had to carry vocally and expressively. And also she had humor. She had a lilt in her voice that you know, I can go to God in prayer didn't sound heavy with her. It sounded like I have this blessed assurance that I can go to God in prayer. It made you feel good.
Mm.
And
Well, that's
yeah,
one of the huge things in the Black church is that there's joy.
yeah,
It's supposed to feel good.
it does. But can that be communicated, let's say, to your German singers? Do they connect to the joy?
I try to help
Freude?
them.
Yeah.
I try to help them. And some of that is again, by using humor
Hmm.
and not taking things too terribly seriously, um, allowing people to laugh at themselves,
Yeah.
and sometimes just moving, letting
Hmm.
themselves move as they're making music,
Yeah.
swing and physicalizing it.
Hmm.
And it brings another dimension
Yeah.
to making music.
So I could continue on this topic because I love it, but there's another thing I want to talk to you about that you've been involved in for quite a while that is incredibly special. One of my very favorite operas of all is Richard Strauss's and Hugo von Hofmannsthal's Elektra.
Oh, yes.
And you have been part of I'm going to call it a touring company, but it's more than that. You've been part of an institution that was created by the late French director Patrice Chéreau.
Mhm.
Um, and what's particular about this production is that, yes, there are many productions that are shared by different opera companies, but this one has a lot more dramatic and musical DNA. And because Chéreau was ill and dying and then died, and other people helped in the project, um, those of you who have been participants and frankly carriers of the original DNA are, to go back to a previous theme, doing the Lord's work in terms of carrying forth Chéreau's vision. And in my memory, I mean, I used to work at La Scala, and a friend of mine at La Scala said that all of you were in rehearsal there. It opened in Aix-en-Provence, but I think you were
Yes.
rehearsing at La Scala. Is that correct?
Well, yes. We spent almost 2 weeks in Milan to rehearse with Waltraud because Waltraud's doing a production of Valkyrie or something, I think it was.
Yeah.
And she couldn't be free to come to X to rehearse, so they brought the production to her.
So this being Valtraud Meyer, who sang Clytemnestra.
Yes.
Yeah. Um,
Can you imagine they actually brought an entire cast and crew to another city to work with one singer?
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, Patrice Chéreau was, I think, a great director.
Yes.
I met him. I have friends who worked with him. I never worked with him, but I would love to know. Well, I'll say briefly about the production. You can say more. That
Mm-hmm.
it starts with I forget what they're called in German, the serving women. I think there are six of you.
Megde.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the music does not start the way it does most electro productions. You are, in effect, doing your labors on the stage,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly the music starts.
Yes.
And that's different from every other electro production I know, where you may have a curtain down and a dark stage, whatever, then ba ba ba, and then suddenly "Wo bleibt Electra" is the first line,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and you lunge in. In this particular case, Chéreau, did he say to any of you, at what moment he thought the music should start and why it starts late?
Um, we we're preparing the household to open up basically. And when we open the gates to let in the staff, that's when the music starts because that's when the day officially starts.
Okay.
So all that with, putting water on the floor and sweeping and all this kind of stuff and just preparing the house. We're preparing for that entrance.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's also when Electra herself darts in like a bat out of hell
Hmm.
because she's been out in the street all night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the first Electra in Aix-en-Provence?
That was Evelyn Herzlitzius.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. Wow. Wow.
She was a force of nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and who was the first Chrysothemis? I don't know if I remember.
Adrian Pitsonka.
That's right. Because I
Mm-hmm.
saw it in Milan. My
Mm-hmm.
friend at La Scala basically said to me, I know you love Les Troyens, which is on at the same time, but you do have to see this Electra. And I love both those operas, so it was not hard for me to stay an extra day in Milan. But it was a phenomenal experience because apart from anything else, the six women, are they five or six plus the overseer? I should know
Well,
this by now.
it's five make the and the overseer,
And one
but
overseer. Okay.
we're a group of six basically.
Right. That's how I think of you as five plus one.
Mm-hmm.
What I also loved in Chiro's view of this is that each of the five women had a very distinct personality,
Yes.
and the fifth being a rather different one from some of the others. But all of you were the first, is that correct?
Yes, I was
Yeah.
erste Mal. Mhm.
So how did Shiro speak to you, or how did you develop your character as the first woman? And what
Well,
did you come to understand her to be?
he developed each character based on the text. And the Elstermark was somewhat aggressive.
Hmm.
And there's there's a certain kind of anger in her. You know, she's not fond of Electra. She finds her scary.
Yeah.
And her fear kind of translates as aggression. And so when I say Wo bleibt Electra, it's kind of like, where in the hell is she?
Hmm. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and why isn't she here? And she's doing something weird and all this kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And the he every time I make an entrance, I'm kind of escalating the action,
Hmm.
you know, and it culminates in attacking the fifth maid,
Yeah.
but the Erstemag drives that aggression. The the second maid is kind of a bit of an instigator,
Hmm.
and she eggs people on. It's like,
Hmm.
and you, and then, and what, and then what did you do, and and then what did you do, you know, and she's younger. Her clothes are a bit more tattered. She comes from a poorer background, and she's a little scruffy,
Hmm.
you know. Um, the Aristomach is kind of more of a matron kind of a figure, the youngest of the older people.
Yeah.
um, the third maid is a storyteller,
Ah.
and she kind of likes to be the center of attention and to tell these stories and to get very expressive, like a
Hmm.
Gaia and all this
Yep.
kind of thing, because she likes to be seen.
Hmm.
And, there's a certain kind of vanity in there. The fourth maid is also younger, new, relatively new. She is a bit timid, doesn't want to get start any trouble, doesn't want to get into any trouble, and she is more sympathetic to
Hmm.
Electra, but she's afraid to show it because the other three are so hostile,
Yeah.
you know. And the fifth is the former nanny
Hmm.
of Electra, Chrysothemis, and Orestes as children, and in many ways more of a mother to them than Clytemnestra.
Yeah.
Clytemnestra was forced to marry Agamemnon.
Hmm.
You know, having these children is practically the result of rape.
Yeah.
So she's not so close to her children. And the real maternal instincts came from the fifth maid. That's why
Hmm.
instead of being played by a soubrette, she's played by a mature older woman.
It was Roberta Alexander, as I recall.
Yes,
She was wonderful.
yes,
She brought a whole career to that performance. And one of the many things I loved about I didn't love everything about the production, but I basically loved it, was the degree to which all five of you were such distinct personalities.
mm,
Because often for many people watching the opera Electra, it doesn't begin until she starts singing. But in the Chirot production, it really began with all of you
yes.
and set the context for what was to come. What I didn't care for about the production, I'm giving away something, but too bad. Um, I love how in Greek tragedies, a lot of the brutal things happen off stage, and the
Yes.
audience has to imagine what's happening. In
Mm-hmm.
this production, some I won't give away what, but some of the things are shown, and I would rather, not because I'm timid, I would rather use my lurid imagination to picture what's happening
Mm-hmm.
rather than see what is happening right there, because then it matches the music and it matches the story and the libretto. But I don't know. That was the only thing. And I'm not asking you to comment on that if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought in every other way it was a brilliant production.
Well,
And yeah.
I think to a certain extent it depends on how it's played. Um, in in Berlin, the character that you're talking about,
Hmm.
no spoilers,
No spoilers.
you know, um, was very strong and a very good actor.
Hmm.
And I think that the way that that was enacted was very convincing. You know, in the production you saw in La Scala, that was in probably in 2014, yes?
Yep.
Okay, that was a different performer.
Hmm.
And I'll leave it there.
But I also saw it in New York when it came to the Met, when all of you came to the Met, and I visited with you backstage.
Hmm.
Um, it was, I think, a different performer again. And
Yes.
because Chirot sadly had died,
Oh, yeah.
um, what we have now are people who worked with him who are remounting the production, plus the crucial fact of all of you who worked with him.
Hmm.
And part of what I just find so miraculous about this particular production is the degree to which all of you who worked with him carry it forward and understand his vision and perhaps adapt somewhat to the different theaters and the different leads.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you five and any of you who have the DNA um, are the guardians and custodians of Shiro's vision. Um, Also, I forget I should know this character by now.
It's an
I don't
honor.
know. Is the tutor? Is he called the tutor? The very old man.
Franz Matura, the
That's Franz
alto
Mazur.
Pfleger.
Yeah, who I worked a lot with Franz Mazur when he was already an older man, but he was a very old man and he was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think Donald McIntyre played the role once too in another.
No, no, Donald McIntyre played the Altadena.
Yeah, the old
And
servant. Yeah.
yes. And kind of an inside, not so much a joke, but kind of an inside thing was to have in the recognition scene, Franz and Donald recognize each other.
Hmm.
It was Wotan and Gunther recognizing each other, from 40 years before.
Um, do you have particular recollections you would share for us about Patricia Rowe?
Yeah. Um, he, well, he was very intense, um, sometimes difficult, but he had a lot of respect for us. He always treated us with respect, never asked us to do things that we were not physically capable of doing, which is more than a notion some days,
Yeah.
these days, because, some of these regisseurs want you to stand on your head and spin while singing a high C,
Hmm.
you
Yep.
know, and he didn't ask anyone to do things that their bodies did not naturally do. And there was always a reason for even the smallest gesture.
Hmm.
Everything was very, very thoroughly and meticulously thought through. And he just wasn't throwing some of what I see in some productions is it's like it's clear that somebody just did something just to be doing something.
Gratuitous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he never did that, you know. And that that reasoning and that thoroughness was also kind of a form of respect for the
Hmm.
performers. Um, he handpicked each one of us because he was looking for very specific types for each character, and he
Hmm.
had a very complete idea in his mind of what he wanted. Um, I think that working on this, he put his life's blood into it,
Yeah.
and it sustained him and kept him alive for longer.
I
Because we,
remember that he was receiving chemotherapy and he would go
yeah,
for his treatments and that he directed and worked with all of you on his better days when he was battling the chemotherapy and the cancer and so on.
yes.
Um, to what degree were all of you, I know you were aware of his illness, but aware
Oh,
of it in
very
the
much so.
sense that he was fighting it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a presence as part of because it must have changed. Sadly, I think we've all worked with people who are ill or in some way compromised.
Hmm.
But when they're doing an artistic creation that may be their last, that they're in effect creating their legacy with, he had a great legacy anyway, but with this particular work, it's heightened in terms of the emotions and the feelings, and also, although the opera is about 95 minutes, there are longer operas, it's such an intense work
Yes.
that must have been in a very different way, very draining.
Well, actually, it was the opposite of draining. It was you felt kind of hyped up.
Hmm.
It's like it would take a bit of time to wind down,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
And how can I put this in words exactly? Um, you kind of found yourself throwing yourself into it.
Hmm.
And the adrenaline starts going and all that kind of thing. And then you kind of have to really take a moment after a rehearsal or after a performance, especially after a performance,
Yeah.
to just kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, rehearsing that particular scene for the Megda, we had some long days. We had some long days, you
Hmm.
know. It could be exhausting. It could be exhausting, you know. We probably put in maybe 90 hours of rehearsal time on that one
Wow.
scene.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It was no joke.
No.
But the end result was so powerful
Yeah.
for for us as well as for the public, you know. And it's such a privilege to be a part of something like that,
Hmm.
you know. I don't take it for granted in the
No.
least bit. In terms of Patrice and his illness, we were all hoping that he would make it to see the production in La Scala.
Hmm.
And we closed in August of 2013 in X, and he was gone in October.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were all a little stunned at just how fast it was,
Yeah.
you know.
It's as if the work to get it through and on the stage in X is what sustained him, but then it's
Yeah,
kind of like the way Electra dies, that the life force goes out of her when she no longer has the objective. Her objective is to get revenge. And once her objective is met, you can hear it in the music, the way she collapses.
yeah.
And it's a similar thing. I'm not saying that he in any way wanted revenge, but that he did what he had to do to get that accomplished. And
Mhm.
then that was it.
He kind of
Um,
let go,
yeah,
you know.
kind of like a marionette where the strings are suddenly cut and the doll just comes down. This production has been shared by many theaters. I think I can name some of them. Um, Aix-en-Provence,
Mm-hmm,
Milan, Helsinki,
mm-hmm,
Barcelona, New
mm-hmm,
York. What am I
mm-hmm.
leaving out?
Berlin?
Berlin, yes. Amsterdam?
No,
No.
no. Yeah, that's all of them.
Okay.
It was done twice in Milan. It was done again in 2018, in 2014 and 2018.
Hmm.
2016 was Met, Helsinki, Berlin, and Barcelona.
Hmm.
I loved Barcelona.
Why? For what reason?
Every reason,
Yeah. Do
the
I
Gallery.
recall that you went fashion shopping in Barcelona?
I did. Well,
I do have a good memory.
the 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 gentlemen that I was renting from were fashion designers.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta hello. Yeah, I have to plug my phone in. I'll
Okay.
be walking and talking.
All right.
So, um, the the gentleman that I was renting from, I'm gonna kind of lay my phone down for a second.
Okay.
Ah, oh, now bien.
All right.
Okay, we have power.
Okay.
The gentleman I was renting from um, were fashion designers, and we got along very well. And I kind of asked about, you know, the possibility of a gown for concerts and this kind of thing. And they made an offer of designing a dress for me and using that as a model for their pattern making business,
Hmm.
you know, and for using my figure type
Hmm.
as an example of not so easy to design for, you know, um, how to basically tailor for
Yep.
my kind of figure.
Yep.
And they came up with this gorgeous thing, with this kind of rust red color and
Hmm.
bits of sequins and stuff, and
Yep.
you know, and eventually I got a second one from them,
Hmm.
But what I loved about Barcelona was the wonderful architecture, all the Gaudi buildings. I
Hmm.
was in all of them and just wandering around, and of course the Familia Sagrada
Yep.
and the food.
Yes, the food is pretty phenomenal.
It's amazing, you know. But it just felt nice to be there also.
But there's another thing in my experience of working there and other places. I don't want to say the best, but it's certainly among the best opera audiences I know anywhere.
Yeah,
It's a phenomenal audience. They're knowledgeable, they're appreciative, but they're not overly demonstrative if something is not great. They won't boo, but if
no.
something is really great, they will let you know that they know the difference, that they've seen the best, and that what you're doing is what they approve of. And I love a learned audience that, you know, not where they act out. That's not my thing.
Well,
But
no.
an
Sometimes
audience
they
that,
do that at the Met. It's like,
yeah,
really, y'all? Really? Seriously?
but,
Just a
but
little chill? Just a little?
but I mean, again, I've been to thousands of opera performances in my life. I think the best performance I ever went to, and it was abetted by the audience, was around, I think, April of 1979. And it was when Catalonia was getting some autonomy within Spain.
Mhm.
And they were doing Andrea Chenier with an all Catalan cast of Montserrat Caballé, Jose Carreras, and
Oh,
Juan Pons. And
nice.
the program for the first time was printed in English, Spanish, and Catalan. And to
Okay.
have this Catalan cast in front of the Catalan audience, they didn't have to say anything like, hey, we're Catalans and we've gotten some independence. You just felt it. And the artists were extra inspired. And Calvia was always terrific, and Carreras was just phenomenal that night. And I'm getting goosebumps as I say this. I've
Mhm.
been in many great performances as an audience member, a few as a worker in opera, but I've never experienced a night like that in terms
Ooh.
of. But although actually I'm going to transition to my next topic, one other night like that is something that you have included among your recommended and preferred performances on Adagio that you picked, namely Shirley Verrett as Lady
Oh,
Macbeth in Milan with Claudio Botto conducting. I worked on the revival of that production, not the original with Streller,
okay.
but I worked when it was revived. I worked on that as a young opera guy. And I already loved Shirley Verrett from afar. I'd never met her, worked with her, and she was extraordinary in
She was
this. I mean, in
fired.
everything, but she was just phenomenal. And in the letter scene, the way Streller staged it was rather than have her read it, They used a microphone, and they had the man playing Macbeth, read the letter. So all you had was Shirley Verrett responding, looking at the page, hearing the words spoken by Macbeth, and then ambizioso spirito tu sei Macbetto. And but her face, her acting, everything while listening to the letter was already so transfixing that it only got better when she started singing, but already we were at a level that very few people I've seen achieved on an opera stage. So tell me
Well,
about Shirley Verrett and you, because you picked her as one of the, and this particular performance.
well, I've seen video clips. I haven't seen the entire
Yeah,
performance, but she just was electric.
yeah,
She was pure fire.
yeah.
And the way she would move around the stage with that massive cape,
Mm-hmm.
and it was it was just so powerful,
Yeah,
and vocally flawless.
yeah.
Um, I did get to meet her in person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as a young singer, I was in the Opera Center in Chicago, and she was the guest of honor at a high tea that was
Mm-hmm.
given by Etta Moulton Barnett. Do you know that name?
Nope.
Um, eh, um, she was one of the first people to sing Bess,
Mm-hmm.
the
Okay.
original Besses. Um, she's no longer with us, but she was part of Chicago's Black High Society,
Mm-hmm.
and she gave a high tea, which was very elegant and you know stately, um, to welcome her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited by Barbara Pryor. Do you know Barbara?
Yes.
Yes. And as a young artist in the program, to come to this high tea and to meet this incredible lady. And one of the things that I um, remarked about her was that she seemed to have this glow that came from inside,
Mm-hmm.
this radiance. And she was very gracious to me.
Yeah.
And, I was just a kid. I didn't know anything, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but I was totally in awe.
I gather that she was a wonderful teacher post when she stopped singing. She taught at the University of Michigan. And
Yes.
I gather that she was a remarkable singer. I got to work with her somewhat at the Met. Um, I had studied with Tito Gobi,
Ah,
and when Gobi mounted his production of Tosca, it was conducted by James Conlon, and it starred Tito Gobi as Scarpia, Shirley Verrett as Tosca, and Luciano Pavarotti as Mario, conducted by James Conlon. And there's a video of this. And
hmm.
this was my first. I mean, I was sort of in the wings at La Scala for Lady Macbeth, and we spoke a little bit, but she knew that I was an American. She knew that I was a student, but I was in a managerial position at the Met, and it was a different relationship. And what I can say about her, I don't think I'm telling anything too private, but um, one of my many jobs at the Met was that after the performance, many artists would want to see members of the public or go to the green room or whatever they wanted. She and just very few other artists really did not want to see anyone after the performance. She
Uh-huh.
wanted to decompress and go home. And I had to arrange that someone escort her out a different exit from the Met, not the stage door,
Uh-huh.
simply because she she was too exhausted or emotionally spent or whatever that she didn't feel that she could turn off her performance and sort of greet people and be polite and make small talk. So I always accommodated that with her and her husband, Lou, I think was his name. And I would just have a separate door that they would go out of that was near my office. And somehow the public never figured that out. So that they would always leave out, and no one ever saw Miss Ferret after the performance. And people used to wonder why.
Well, I can understand how she would feel that way.
Hmm.
You know, Tosca's a big role.
Yeah.
Um, there are enormous emotional changes that you go through. It's big singing.
Hmm.
Um, she was tired.
Yeah. And we had her Carmen, her Eboli. I mean, all the roles. It was not just Tosca. Her Didon, whatever it is she was doing after the performance, that was it. She just said, "Thank you. I apologize, but I need to go on my own way."
Mhm.
She did. Um, when I
That's
was,
completely
yes,
understandable.
when I was young, and I was going to performances,
Mhm.
there was a famous dual concert with Shirley Verrett and Grace Bumbry. And
Ah, yeah.
I remember that I was sitting all the way up in the top of Carnegie Hall in the last row, and there was a lovely lady sitting next to me named Chloe Irby. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you a Bunbury or are you a Verrett?" And I said, "I'm a Bunbury," because my first Grace Bunbury was not my first opera singer, but my first opera performance where I was sort of awakened to opera was with Grace Bunbury.
Oh, wow.
And so I followed her. She was Orfeo in Gluck's Orfeo at the Met when I was about 11. And I just
Hmm.
was completely captivated by that performance. But I remember that Chloe Irby said to me, "You may be a Bunbury now, but you're going to become a Verrett when you get older." And it was very interesting because it's not that one has to like one or the other,
Well, they're
but there were
different.
very different kinds of artists. And you put both Grace Bunbury and Shirley Verrett on your list. Um, talk about Grace died last year. Talk
Yes.
about Grace and her particular what she brought to the stage.
Um, Flair,
Yeah.
Flair. Um, I saw a video of her judgment scene in Aida,
Hmm.
and it was with it was in London. It was not in New York, and I was just mesmerized at how she moved and how she internalized everything. It was all there, you know. It
Hmm.
she wasn't phoning it in.
Yeah, never, never, never.
Never,
Did you
never.
ever see that video she created in which she did Act Two, Scene One of Aida, in which she played both Aida and Amneris?
No, I haven't seen
That
that.
that you want to find on YouTube. It is just it's phenomenal for its audacity that it would apparently Grace Bumbry would not mind playing both roles, and
Yeah,
it's really quite something. But flair is
she was
certainly
a
the word. I
diva,
remember
diva.
once a performance she did at Carnegie Hall, a solo recital, and she came out, and there was a piano, and the lid was partially closed, and she expressed mock horror that it would be closed, as if she needs to have that covered. So she turned her back to the audience and she shook her head in mock horror, and then she had the lid opened. She walked off the stage, came back on the stage with the same sweep as before, looked at it with approval, and she said, "Now I can sing."
Well, that's showbiz.
It is showbiz. Um, you also have included wonderful Leontine Price, Neil Schickoff, and Bryn Tervel on your list. Um, I'm glad that you had a chance to go into the Adagio catalog somewhat. It is
Yeah, It's
It's like,
fun.
the land of treasures to go there.
Yeah.
And Leontine Price, you have Mil Trovatore, the famous 1961 performance. You
Oh,
have Neil Chikoff singing as
Eliezer.
Eleazar in La Juive by Olivet, which is a
Yeah.
role that he took up when it was a bit jinxed because Richard Tucker and other tenors, Caruso, who sang it, died soon after doing the role. Um,
Really, I didn't know
did you
that.
know that? Oh yeah. Part of the problem why tenors were not doing this role is both Caruso burst a blood vessel or something in his throat, Richard Tucker had a heart attack, and
Ooh.
tenors were not touching that role. And Chikoff bravely approached it and broke the curse, so to speak.
It's intensely emotional.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, it's heartbreaking,
yeah,
and he just puts 150% into it.
yeah, yeah.
It's not always pretty singing,
No,
but it's authentic.
yeah, I know. And Bryn
Fantastic.
Tervel from Tannhäuser.
Mm.
I know. I mean, it's one of my very favorite operas. It's my favorite Wagner and one of my favorite operas. And he sings it like a poem.
Yes.
Yeah. Not to ignore Miss Price, I sort of jumped right over her. But to me, she's a given as a gold standard
Well,
that,
yeah.
you know, but thank you anyway for Miss Leontine Price and she sang Il Trovatore. Not my favorite Verdi opera.
No, it's
Musically magnificent, but I mean,
the story
I
is kind of like, really, y'all? Okay.
yeah, it's just like, what are they upset about?
You threw the wrong baby in the fire, did she
Yep,
now?
yep,
That's a stretch. Okay.
yep. But Bonita Hyman, I have to close up now, but this has been a wonderful visit.
Well,
And I
thank
thank
you.
you. I
Thank
thank
you.
you. We've
I'm
learned a
having
lot from
fun.
you today. Yeah, we've learned a lot from you today, and that is always my goal with this program. And keep up the good work.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to seeing you live and in person and hearing you. And
Mhm.
also, I'd love next time I'm in Germany to hear some of your choirs because
Oh,
I think
yes.
that would be very special.
Oh, that would be fun. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Oh,
But
by
for
the way,
today,
before I
yes,
forget, I
yes,
love that shirt.
I wore it for you. Sometimes I wear shirts a little more sober, but I decided we're in the middle of winter, middle to late winter. We need a little color in late winter. So um, I purposely put it on. I don't wear the shirt very often, but I wear it when I'm in the mood, either to give a lift or in this case, late winter, we need the color.
Yeah.
We need the
Yeah.
brightness. Bonita Hyman, thank you so much and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure.
You have a good evening then.
You too.
Okay.